I'm excited to be here with you today. I have been thinking a lot about this over the past few days. And one, I changed my mind on a major issue, which is the best path forward with Israel. Because a
Oh,
lot of people know I have been pretty ardently Zionist in the past. And two,
are you a Zionist or are you a pragmatist?
I'm more of a pragmatist, and I think that I'll explain where I've changed my view on this. And I think that if this is correctly implemented, and the reason I'm going to lay this out in the podcast is I'm going to lay out every step in terms of doing this, how you would do it as a Republican administration right now. And I will explain how it basically destroy the modern Democratic Party if Trump can execute on this.
The path forward to own the libs, cut off Israel?
Cut off Israel, yes. So we're going to go over how you can do this, how you can do this in a way that is politically viable, how you can do this in a way that maintains a strong relationship with Israel, how you can do this in a way that strengthens our relationship, not just with Israel, but with the Middle East more broadly, how you can do this in a way that Netanyahu has basically baited already. And I was unaware that Netanyahu has kept saying this. And
So they want it anyway.
The only reason why we are not aggressively moving towards this right now is APAC, who we need to just railroad, although I will go over that APAC has shown a willingness to bend on stuff like this in the past if it's laid out to them logically.
Ooh.
And the thing that sort of brought this up for me, so I'll go into where I started to go down this path, was twofold. One was I was talking with a fan in the Discord, and they're like, you've always said that the right should not maintain any issue like this that's an overlap of ideologies that we can't actually win elections with, right? Or that's really going to impact our chances of winning elections.
Yeah, and that's why Trump's approach with like 90-10 issues has been so smart, right? Like
but we get so much in terms of Jewish and APAC money, it can be useful even in terms of if it's not getting out the vote, in terms of getting out the money, which helps get out the vote more. But there's a few problems here. One is money has been mattering less and less in terms of election cycles historically. And two is what happened recently, which is recently one of the girls from the Red Scare podcast for having Nick Fuentes, not even their own beliefs, but interviewing him on their podcast, got like actually canceled. And I was under the position that cancellation was over. Like they lost a major job contract, they lost their agency. And I was like, no, like this is the type of thing that when it happens to someone in the right, the rest of the right needs to 100% get behind them. Tucker Carlson has done some iffy things, but this is different. This is like a more mainstream, like not like Venezuela dictator interviewing type. This is more like, and I think that was cool that he did that, whatever. But I can understand where you can be like, oh, he's a more out there figure on the right these days. This is a more centrist figure on the right these days. And two is Ben Shapiro has been basically spiraling like lemon grab since this event.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable! Unacceptable!
And I'm just like, the mainstream of the right, like it's very obvious to me the mainstream of the right is going to have to cut the Ben Shapiro faction completely off if we don't want a full-on civil war. Would you agree with that, by the way, Simone?
Yeah.
If you're like, well, why the Ben Shapiro faction and not the Nick Fuentes faction? The reason is twofold. One is you just have to be practical. Ben Shapiro has been dropping followers like flies recently, like 20,000 unsubs every month. He's been losing people for the past, well, really since this blew up. So it's obvious that he's losing in the public mind, but not just that. It's also that he committed the cardinal sin of the modern right, which is attempting to ban people and make arguments based on pearl clutching rather than rational argument. We cannot allow that. That needs to be an absolute. If you do that, you are out. Right? That makes you a leftist. That is the argument that the leftists have been retreating to. And if you normalize that style of argument, then the leftists automatically win because they always win in the game of you hurt my fifis. And that's the game that Ben Shapiro has been trying to play. You said something that falls outside of what I consider and what the dominant culture considers socially normal. But the modern right is made up of people who oppose the dominant culture, that oppose the urban monoculture. So, of course, we cannot allow the mainstreaming of that form of argumentation. I ran a sentiment analysis on X, and 70 to 75% of the tweets that have gone out about Ben Shapiro recently have been extremely negative, with only 5 to 10% being positive. And the 5 to 10% that are positive are pretty much exclusively from boomers and neocons, which are factions that are dying out. If you do not want anti-Semitic sentiment to grow, we need to cut out the type of sentiment that Ben Shapiro represents.
And so
Seems
how
that
do
way.
we navigate that without losing Israel, which is very important in terms of being a highly economically productive, highly technologically productive nation
that has a decent fertility rate, in fact, the only such country on Earth.
that has a good reason to be allied with us going into the future, right? How do we do that with them, right? While keeping them on board, basically completely cut them off. And there is a way too that helps us in a ton of other areas as well. So to go forwards. By the way, the larger problem, what are your thoughts on it? Do you actually believe that we do sort of like things are sort of coming to a head where the American right cannot maintain both of these ideologies?
It does, yeah. It seems like, especially Nick Fuentes trending so much, even in our comments, I see it. This really weird
Well, and Ben
tension.
Shapiro is so coming off as the weenest bad guy in all this. And that, like, we sort of need a mainstream play. And that's the reason why we're making this episode, because a lot of policymakers watch our show, or a number do at least. But we've spoken at the White House on this stuff. And a lot of other influencers watch our show. And so if we can begin influencing a third way forwards and a way that has so many positive externalities for the party, let's do it. Right?
Yeah, because honestly, the arguments that I mostly hear against Israel all get grouped in by some people into like, oh, this is, you're trying to exterminate Jews. When like some people are just like, hey, why are we paying for this? Like some of the arguments are very, very, very reasonable.
And Israel needs to make it so these arguments are not reasonable. And the way
well, I mean, I think this is similar to your AI argument, where if you make it such that one group cannot exist, period, then the other group is obligated to.
Yeah, what she's saying is, if you say I will kill any human who is better than me through like augmentations, or I will kill any AI that's better than me, then eventually you mandate those systems turning against you.
Yeah, and right now the way the arguments seem to be going is like, well, if you question Israel at all, then you are the enemy, or if you support Israel at all, then you are the enemy, and we need to de-escalate that to like more boring.
Well, I actually don't even think we need to de-escalate it. I think we can do the throwing the anchor off the boat in mid-flight to turn it around at full speed.
Lower the starboard anchor!
Like they do.
We're really mixing metaphors here.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Flying boats.
No, what I mean is or the Apollo 13 use our trajectory in one direction with gravitational pull to slingshot us at an equal velocity in the opposite direction in a way that your opponents don't see coming at all.
Totally change course. Whiplash
we'll
everyone
go over how
into
this
a point of stunned submission.
So right now the US is putting about 3.8 billion. This is like on an average year in terms of our pre-existing agreements with a 10-year memorandum signed in 2016 with Israel, right? I'm suggesting we cut this off before the turning point, and I'll explain why in just a second. Now, if we put that 3.8 billion in context, it's really not that much. Consider that that's like Ethiopia is 1.8 billion a year. Jordan is 1.7 billion a year. So that's as much as we're giving Ethiopia and Jordan every year, except that money stays in Ethiopia and Jordan. And with Israel, it's mostly coming back to us. I think over 90% comes back to our military contractors, who are going to be the biggest problem in doing this. Like Ethiopia and Jordan are not long-term geopolitically relevant to us. Israel is long-term geopolitically relevant to us. So why are we like caring about this, right? Like optically speaking. And that's when I started to be like, okay, so what actually happens? And we're going to go into the economics of cutting Israel off. Or it's not just them. What if you took like Jordan, Egypt together? That's about the same amount a year. What if you took Yemen, Nigeria, Somalia, and Kenya together? That's about the same amount per year. And again, it's much worse in these countries because we're wasting the money in these countries, i.e. it stays in those countries. It's for development. In Israel, it mostly comes back to us. Let's cut it off. But let's go forward here. All right, so the Foreign Military Financing, FMS, under the 2016 to 2028 Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, which was a binding treaty but not legally enforceable agreement between the governments. So the president actually has flexibility here. Aid is appropriated by Congress each year, so Trump couldn't, quote unquote, just cut it off, although I do think it is smart to push it to Congress, and I'll explain why in a second, overnight without legislative buy-in. But he could delay disbursements, attach new conditions, e.g. tying it to, quote unquote, American first procedures favoring U.S. jobs, or push for reductions via budgetary proposals. And he's already done stuff like this in other areas. So how would Trump frame this in a way that doesn't just burn everything down? Well, what's important to note is Trump's unique relationship with Israel. Trump, in his first term, moved the embassy very controversially into Jerusalem, which freaked everyone else in the left the F out. But in Israel,
that was announced while you were in Israel, wasn't it?
Yeah, they like had his picture projected on buildings around like Jerusalem when I was there. It was very big.
It was a big deal. It wasn't
then
just like
he negotiated the hostage release in Israel, where they regularly, on the left and the right in Israel, they super came together over this. They like painted big memorials of him on beaches and stuff like this. It was seen as like an across the board, broadly good thing, where some leftists attacked Trump over this, but broadly everyone in Israel thought this was a good idea. Then you had the helping Israel in Iran, right? So if Trump said, hey, let's cut this off, and we're going to go to Netanyahu and see that Netanyahu has actually suggested this broadly, and the core reason Trump hasn't gone along with it is because of people who are basically more Zionists than Netanyahu in the United States positions that we can get around. We'll get to that in a second. Cut off this funding entirely. If he said, we're going to cut this off, but he frames it as a graduation, basically saying this is military aid. When this military aid was given to you, you had three core opponents that were an existential threat to your state: Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Well, we just helped you deal with Iran. You guys basically handled Hezbollah on your own. They're at like 30% operational efficiency now. And Hamas isn't exactly an existential threat anymore, right? So it only makes sense that we would pull back on these sorts of funding. But you don't do this right away. There's other benefits we could get to this. Before you do this deal, you go to Saudi Arabia. You go to Saudi Arabia and you say, hey, what if we build this framing for you guys, right? You work towards renormalizing with Israel, but we can treat this as a Saudi Arabia victory, America pulling out of funding Israel military, and we will say we did it with you as the negotiator, Saudi Arabia. Now, this is going to look great for Saudi Arabia in terms of regional power plays. And Saudi Arabia can say, look at what happens when Iran tries to move the U.S. out of Israel. The U.S. gets more entrenched. Look at when we try to do it, we actually get the U.S. out of the region. Now, what does this do politically in the United States? Well, the left is completely effed because they've been trying to get the U.S. disentangled from Israel for decades at this point, and they haven't been able to. If Trump did an about face on this, one, his base would be super into it, like his core base would be super into it.
Oh yeah.
It would completely undermine the left in the next elections because he ended the Gaza war and ended military funding in Israel, right? Which would be very hard for leftists to go against at that point, right? And this is becoming like a major issue for them, right? How do you even win? How do you as like AOC go up and try to run against somebody like that or an administration member like that, right? Better, it helps fold the civil war that's happening right now, right? Which is to say, amid doing this, you could make a speech, and I think Vance would do a very good job of handling this because he's very good with nuanced things, that the right should not be about canceling our own, right? Like basically everyone knows who he's talking about on this issue. So it can also be seen as this is what happens if you try to build large cancellation campaigns on the right, like we will about face in a way that you potentially don't like, because I can see Israel will like this, but APAC and people like whatever his name is, Ben Shapiro, will hate this, right? Because it's basically framed as a failure on their part, right? For doing these types of cancellation campaigns, but it will prevent the actual, basically just anti-Semitic for the sake of anti-Semitism from gaining any more ground. Because now they either have to say, in the same way that many leftists had to be like, actually, it wasn't about the war, it was just about the anti-Semitism. Many people on the right are either going to have to take a stance, which is either, okay, now I'm all in MAGA America first again, or no, I still really want to like attack Jewish people, right? So it basically forces people's true colors in a way that prevents anti-Semitism from growing under the guise of we are really concerned about this money we're sending to Israel without getting anything, quote unquote, in return. Now, I've argued that I do think we get stuff in return, but it prevents that argument from being used, which is fundamentally long-term beneficial to Israel. We'll get to that in a second. Before I go further here, thoughts, Simone?
I find this very compelling. Keep going. I mean, the one thing I'm not so sure about is the really heavy lobbying interests behind the companies, the defense companies that are primarily benefiting from this aid.
It's going to be like Boeing. It's going to be like Honeywell. It's going to be like a bunch of American contractors, right? They are going to have an absolute connection because they have been the primary beneficiaries of our aid to Israel.
Because this is basically like a spending program for American businesses where their products end up in Israel.
Yeah. And they framed it as
I feel like that's might be more of a driver behind all this than anyone thinks.
This is actually the beauty of this, right? So Trump can handle all of this in a way where I would believe that like Trump has a strong enough relationship with Netanyahu's government that he can be like, hey, I need you to come out and say like, this is a really good idea. We want to do this. And I'm going to argue that all the signs point to them being amenable to that. If they do that, right, then if you as a congressman or senator come out against this, and recently Democrats have been getting equal to more funding from the military contractors than Republicans, right? The only reason you would be coming out defending this is military contractors, right? If you can get Netanyahu on your side on this, right? And I actually think this would work really well in Israel as well if Netanyahu got on board with this. And I'm going to explain the project that I think we can pitch to Israel that would get him on board with this even further than he already is. But basically, it's Trump's opportunity to call out the quote unquote true deep state. Trump doesn't care about military contractors, but if he's out there being like, anyone who opposes this is clearly doing it not for the sake of Israel, look at what Netanyahu is saying, but because of their crony ties to APAC and the military contractors, this looks good for nobody, right? It's a good way to clear out opposition and Democratic opposition. And watch because so many Democrats just reflexively oppose anything Trump does, watch if a large faction of Democratic congressmen, because I think enough Republicans would be like, oh, like we actually kind of need to get on board with this, especially if we can get Netanyahu on board with this, like your otherwise simpy for Israel, like Ted Cruz types. Well, if the Democrats, and I promise you a large fraction of Democrats reflexively will, end up saying, no, we cannot end these military contracts, it makes the Democratic Party look cooked to their base.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to go into the Netanyahu stuff before I pitch what I think we can do that would make this look really good, like long term. All right. And like we're talking Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, like that's going to be the huge fighters on this, right? They're going to lose their minds over this, and we'll go into it. But let's see, what has Netanyahu been saying on this? Okay. Here's a quote from Netanyahu. We received close to $4 billion for arms. I think we will need to wean ourselves off American security aid, just as we weaned ourselves off of American economic aid. This is a direct quote from Netanyahu during the meeting referenced in multiple expos, and it was in November 13th, 2025.
Okay, so this is very fresh.
Yeah, he's basically saying, I'm up for this. And note here the core danger of not doing this. Under the left, we weaned Israel off of economic aid, right? If they do that for military aid, they're going to own that as a feather in their hat, right?
Mhm.
If we do this as the right, it's going to happen if the left wins anyway, right? Why don't we do this while maintaining a strong relationship in the meantime, right? It's foolish of us to not take advantage of this potential win, given how much it will throw our opponents geopolitically. I mean, even I think in Europe, who's been complaining about the United States-Israel relationship forever, but also locally, right? Okay, other quote here. This is Amit Havali. This is a high-level guy, was a sort of Netanyahu ally guy. He says, quote, Biden or Trump, Witkoff or former Secretary of State Tony Blinken, there is one clear conclusion for the past 2 years. Israel needs to be independent and not reliant. Israel is already 77 years old. It's time to be weaned. This is an important statement by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And this was in March 2025. So basically, he's saying, and this is on his US visit, right? Basically saying, hey, I support Netanyahu in this. So he's getting political support on this. If we go to other interviews, we get Netanyahu saying, I don't know what they're talking about. My direction is in the exact opposite. So basically, this was when they were talking about Netanyahu renewing at the end of 2028 another 20-year agreement. And Netanyahu has said, I plan to do the exact opposite of that. So Netanyahu plans to not renew the agreement. But what would be an even louder political sign is if we cut it off a few years before that, because we don't want Netanyahu handing this win to Democrats, right?
Yeah.
Assuming they end up winning in the next cycle. Like, we basically gain nothing from this. Another quote from Netanyahu. Now I want to make our arms industry independent, totally as independent as possible. Then we have Netanyahu. I think that it is time to ensure that Israel is independent. Then we have Netanyahu. We have a very strong economy, a very strong arms industry. And even though we get what we get, which we appreciate, 80% of that is spent on the US and produces jobs in the US. I want an even more independent Israeli defense industry. Basically, he's saying, do you not see that in a way this hurts us to be so dependent on the United States? Why
it
not?
does. Yeah.
Right? Okay, next one. And this one has been quoted in a few different ways. Israel does not ask others to fight for us. Okay, source close to Netanyahu. And this one, we don't know who it was, but it was confirmed in some reporting. We passed on civilian aid in 1996 and might pass on military aid in 2026. Israel and America are partners, an alliance like no other, fighting on the front lines of civilization. So note here, he's saying, let it pass in 2026. What I'm saying is, no. If that's the direction you're planning to go anyways, handle it in this administration. Cut it off in this administration. It puts you in a much stronger position. And you have the political protection, because who is really going to complain if it's coming from Trump, given all the other things he's already done for Israel?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then in another unconfirmed, per like insider, this is out of the box thinking. We want to change the way in which we handle past agreements and put more emphasis on U.S. Israeli cooperation. The Americans like this idea. So how do you do this in a way that benefits the United States even further? So I've always said that Israel's core advantage is the Jews. A lot of the leading AI people, even in the United States, are of Jewish ancestry, right? So we want to align their interests with ours. If we look at the future of warfare, even currently, Israel has been investing a lot in AI-based projects, right? Now, a lot of their existing AI-based projects are very distributive in terms of how they are implemented. Well, what if you say, when you announce all of this, you say, hey, we want to do a joint effort in one of the most important areas of military technology going forwards, which is AI. Now, one of the things to note with past joint efforts with Israel, as I noted in the past Israel video, is Israel has sometimes sold technology from these joint efforts when they are being done within Israel. This wasn't ones that were being developed in the United States, but when they were developed within Israel, they later sold them to China, and I think in both instances.
Yeah, which,
So,
not something we feel great about.
yeah, so basically, but why were they able to do this? They were able to do this after the projects were discontinued, and they basically had all of the tech that they had been working on in a US co-venture in Israel, right? Okay, but AI is different than something like developing a plane or something like that. You need giant, stable data centers. Exactly the type of thing that would be a very juicy target to the type of people who would want to bomb you, right? Second, they need to be cooled, right? Not easy to do in Israel, right? Because Israel's a hot place. What's a location that is probably the single most defensible place on Earth where you have cheap energy and lots of cooling resources? Oh, the United States, right? So if Israel wanted to move to a partnership relationship with the United States, and they want to develop super advanced AI, and they wanted to show that they are moving into a more equal partners position with the United States, what we should do is a totally joint AI mega project.
I love it.
Now, why is it needing to be totally joint? Because that way it doesn't get sunset like one of these past plane projects and then sold to China. If it is Israel's core mega data center, right, for AI development, and if it is a core development center for US military AI development, it doesn't benefit Israel to leak the technology. It would, in fact, be completely foolish for Israel to leak the technology. Second, it very logically, you're basically saying, hey, why would you develop a mega data center in Israel when it can just be bombed, right? Like there is a logical reason for them to put it in the United States, but now they have a further vested interest in our continued relationship with Israel, in our defense, and in actually making this a really good project. And it looks like a joint project where we can say we won't invest a dime going to Israel because all of this development money is going to the United States. And Israel needs to develop an AI mega project anyway. So why does it matter? Now we might still have quote unquote aid, but it's going directly to the United States. Do not do not collect $200. Not going to Israel, to the United States. And it's going directly to American contractors within the United States developing a project that is directly for American use. It's just that the Israeli government is doing it as a joint project. So it benefits us across the board while actually solidifying our longitudinal alliance much more than military aid for American government contractors does. And this could be used to lower, I think initially, the fears that the government contractors have, which is you go to Boeing, you go to Raytheon, you go, hey, AI is the future anyway, right? We promise you a certain amount of contractor deals in the new AI mega project for the military. And so you're just transitioning the money that used to go to Israel to this. We'll cut them off eventually, but for the first year to have them not do a bunch of lobbying, we can handle this, right?
Well, at least it's not going just to fuel weapons and instead develop something that we benefit from.
Bombs, right? Yeah. Okay, so before I go further on the economics of how Israel can pull this off without American aid, because I'm going to go over, basically we learned in the last military theater that they don't actually need this aid as much as they thought they did.
Oh, really? So basically, was a lot of this to go to get weapons that just aren't going to get used now because they're not relevant with how modern warfare works? Oh, I hate wasted money.
Yeah, it's going to pay for big fancy American tanks and planes that nobody really needs anymore.
Yeah.
But your thoughts before I go further, Simone?
I just want this done now. This sounds good to me.
You just want this implemented? Well, the other joint project we could go into is Israel is bringing them in on Project Replicator, but it would have to be a completely joint project if they were doing that. No, it being developed in Israel. So if they want to have basically Israeli military officials or Israeli military scientists, those people are living and working in the United States facility.
Yeah, I could see that would work better.
That way, and again, we have a core way. You guys have habitually leaked stuff when we've developed it in Israel in the past. It's stupid to develop it in Israel, and it's not even in your own best interest.
Yeah.
All right, continuing here. Okay, so what can we cut? First, we can cut the Navy corvettes, the SAR ships. So these are a partial Northrop developed ship, okay? And you could easily cut 50%, mothball 2 to 3 corvettes. Right now, they're costing around $800 million a year. And there have been no recent naval battles that they would be relevant with. They are really only relevant in Gaza blockade, but the Gaza blockade could be done much better with drone ships than this.
For
so they're
sure.
not particularly relevant. Submarines. Why the heck do you need submarines except for Iran intel? That's really it, is Iranian nuke deterrent, which we can help with anyway. So you could cut this 60% easily. It's around $400 million a year. And there has been no sub warfare in a long time anyway. Air-based defense. This is the Iron Dome Arrow. So they do about 10,000 intercepts. And
yeah, this seems like one of the more active things. I mean, very, very expensive, but also quite active.
Yeah. But also because they've taken down Hezbollah and Hamas significantly, it is something that could potentially be cut back. Another one that could be cut back is the reserve/special forces. Well, this is medium deployment. Well, we'll say maybe. And the cyber intel is obviously incredibly useful.
Yeah.
If you made those potential cutbacks, you could get around 3 to 4 billion a year. And I also think that, and specifically here, I think tanks is what I would focus on cutting back the most. We've seen in more recent warfare types that tanks are less relevant than they have been historically, and things
embarrassing, if any. The only stories I hear about tanks now are just
no,
really
the tanks
stories.
have been useful against Hamas simply because Hamas is so primitive that tanks are still useful against their forces. That said, if you have autonomous drones, why are you using tanks at all? I would actually move entirely to mothball the tank program, like literally tanks off the battlefield entirely. And you could say, why not keep like a small amount? It's because of the cost savings of not having to have any variable parts for these is just so giant. If you completely mothball that and replace that with AI drones, which I think are going to be much more effective, especially at urban combat, I think you're just going to get much better functionality in future combat scenarios. The Air Force is much harder. I also think the Navy can be significantly mothballed with drone ships and drone programs. So just move to an entire drone-based Navy program. And then in terms of the aircraft, just you got to keep it. It's too useful for bombing campaigns and stuff like that, unfortunately. Also, the Navy branch is just not that active. So that's also easy there. Now, in terms of APAC is going to be one of the hardest things to deal with because they're just zealots. But we were able to cut back U.S. economic aid to Israel in spite of APAC. I think we can cut back here. The other thing that really defangs APAC is if this come from Trump. So, thoughts, Simone? We move forward with this. What do you think happens?
I think it better aligns incentives. And I think when people misinterpret concepts around Zionism or support for Israel or opposition for Israel, they're not looking enough at incentives and underlying streams or pathways to human flourishing or human suffering. And what I like about your formulation here and your proposal is that it is designed to optimize around future human flourishing and benevolently aligned incentives in a way that the current status quo, which we still have supported historically over other alternatives, does. Like what we've said in the past is, listen, it makes sense for the US to be allied with Israel. It makes sense for us to have a friend in that
Well, it's
region.
in our best interest. And people have pointed out, they're like, well, there's Jews in Israel that like spit on Christians. And I'm like, there's Christians in the US that spit on Jews. Like, I don't understand. Like, like you've seen the things that like,
Well, and it also doesn't matter. What matters is overall what these countries and their interests are. And yeah, I mean, what we need are allies who support our right to,
right.
pursue
I
our
think that there's
interests.
a misunderstanding where they think that there's like, again, Israel is other than the United States, and the Jewish people are other than, like Protestant populations, right? Like they are a different group with different interests. And I think that you can recognize that this group might favor their own interest over ours. And so the
Yeah.
goal is to align those interests in a way where they can't easily favor their interests over
Well,
ours.
no. The better way to put it is you want to create systems such that their best interests are best served in a way that also serves our best interests.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say,
Everyone
right? Like,
acting maximally selfishly acts in a way that benefits each other.
exactly.
And right now,
And I
it's
will
not set up that way.
point out here that there is like people will be like, oh, there are Jews who dislike, goyim or whatever, or even America more broadly, right? Or Christians. And my answer is yeah, and there's a lot of Christians who hate Jews, right? Like if we allow potential alliances to be leveled by the iterations of each faction that hate the other one, you wouldn't have any ally on earth, right? Like there's factions within every group that hate every other group,
Well,
right?
it seems so stupid to just hate a group. Like what you need to look at is, okay, what do you want and how are you going to get it? And what groups are
Yeah, well, I mean,
likely
like
to be good
we had
allies in that
people
battle.
on the Discord being like, "Oh, like Israel is destroying like 1,000-year-old churches," and I was like, "Where on earth is that happening?" And they're like, "In Gaza," and I'm like, "You understand that the Christian population in Gaza was genocided, right? Like they used to have a decent Christian population, and now it's less than 1% of the population."
For context, when Palestine was created, Christians made up, this was in 1922, 9.5% of the population. Now they're well under 1%.
And this is a bit like saying like the US was anti-Semitic because we bombed, an ancient temple in Dresden when we were firebombing it during World War II. Like obviously interests are aligned here. Like it matters much more the actual humans who are being genocided in a region. Not that Israel can prevent that without a total occupation of the region, but I'm just saying that like if you're talking about are Christians being genocided in Israel, absolutely not. Are Christians being genocided in many Muslim majority areas around the world today? Yes, they are. So it's worth like being aware of the scope of the conflict, and that the conflict, I think going forwards, and as I've said, going forwards in a world of demographic collapse, alliances are going to matter much less between countries and much more between cultural groups, i.e., Jews, Protestants, Catholics, Protestants, various Muslim groups, etc. Right? Like, and within a country, your alliance is going to be much more towards your broader cultural group than it's going to be towards your individual country. And I think that this is broadly already true across most of Europe. It's just that like the Muslims realize it and the native Europeans don't yet. But for that reason, a lot of those countries are going to fall. Like it's just inevitable that they're going to fall at current demographic rates. And so when we think about like the future aligned power factions, there's a lot of the regions that we think we can like. Also, I don't even think that Europe is really on our side anymore. They've gone so woke that even if they maintain power,
time. It hasn't felt like that since 2016.
yeah, I see them like when I look at the core nexuses of power that oppose U.S. interests, like geopolitically, I'm typically like it's the woke Europe monoculture, it's the Chinese alliance, it's the sort of one Muslim faction largely, which is the Iran nexus, maybe Saudi Arabia, but they're more our allies ish. They're like in the Ishi zone. More directly opposed to us in the Saudi Arabian faction is the Vatican faction. They are always criticizing us, and the socialist countries that fall under their control always are, saying the things about us. And then in terms of like the nexus that like is more reliable, I think, is like when I'm looking, it is United States, Israel, maybe the UK if it can be reclaimed, but that seems unlikely. Maybe Australia if it can be reclaimed, but that's likely unlikely. Maybe New Zealand, but that's also unlikely. So like the only reliable player we have on the table is Israel, which is one of the reasons why I'm like, it makes sense to invest in them,
What about
but it doesn't
Japan?
make sense to invest in them in a way that could cause us long-term reputation or even electoral damage if they plan to pull out in 2026 anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So any fans of this, if you're in the, I know we have fans related to the Israeli government, try to get this idea up to like get Netanyahu's administration, get him to mention it to Trump or somebody like that, or within the Trump administration. I want to see this idea broadcast more because I think it would destroy the left in this country while building a much stronger, more realistically permanent alliance between the United States and Israel. And also fix part of the problem we have growing within the right and completely throw cold water on growing anti-Semitism among the right in the United States.
Plus boost investment in AI, which is the ultimate arms race we should be focused on right now, not
Exactly.
on foreign conflicts that honestly don't matter that
Well,
much.
also potentially strengthen our relationship with the Saudi Arabia alliance, which would be really powerful. If we
Yeah,
can say,
I love that element of it. I do. Yeah.
all right,
Another nice perk.
love you, Simone. And I've totally done a 180 on this, and it largely came from the fan who was like,
I don't.
yeah,
Have you done a 180? I mean, we've always your interest in Israel. I mean, we like
I
Jewish
think no, but what I'm
culture.
saying is we need a faction in the right that's actively pushing, being like, look, like we need to cut military funding to Israel now. They won the war. It's over. Now is the time to do it.
I know. It's just I feel like there's this tendency for people, and this is something that just culturally we don't do. There are a lot of people who are just like, this group is good, or this person is good, or I love this person because this person is just inherently valuable. You know, like I just love them because they exist, or I love these people because they exist. And a lot of people view Zionism as the Jewish people have a right to Jerusalem.
That is not, by the way I view Zionism.
Well, I know,
I
but
think
let
Zionism is the Jewish
me
people
explain.
have a
Like,
right to fight for a right to
well,
Jerusalem.
that's the thing is people confuse the two. So they think they impose that view on everyone because they themselves hold it. These weird totalizing, like definitional, this person is good or this person deserves love. And we are extremely pragmatic and conditional in everything. Like, I love you because, or, you know, these people deserve this place because they're the best ones to run it right now. Or, you know, we like Judaism as a religion and a cultural set because we see that it produces really compelling outcomes. We like the fact that Jewish contingents run Israel because Malcolm visited it and saw how well it was going. Like,
but what I'm saying is the Jews would lose their right to Israel and Jerusalem if somebody defeated them. If
yeah,
they lost the 7
you
days
are
war, I would
entitled
not
to what
say
you
they have
can
a right
take.
to it.
Yeah.
I would say the stronger force won. You know,
Yeah.
they through political maneuvering and their own blood, they earned that right, but
Yeah.
it can be lost at any time.
Yeah, well, and the U.S. should be, in our view, aligned with Israel because the U.S. benefits from that alignment. It's not that we believe that there's some inherent reason.
I
Just
also
kind of like if we had a family member who was like severely addicted to drugs and stealing from other family members, like some people are like, well, that person deserves to be taken care of no matter what. No, we cut them off. And like, that's a family tradition of Malcolm. Like, even more ruthless than that, like basically if you're not succeeding, like, well, don't come to me.
final
So
question for you on this.
yeah.
Venezuela. Do
What
you
about
think we
it?
should intervene? They've got a lot of oil. They've got a lot of rare earth minerals. We have political capital to intervene because of the Nobel Prize. What do you think?
I feel like there are things going on with Venezuela that we don't know about.
I feel like
So-
they're already intervening in a way that doesn't require full on the ground operations. That's sort of where I am with that right now, I think.
I mean, Trump keeps saying, like, we've got plans. I can't tell you about them.
Well, the
And
fact that the Nobel Prize winner seemed so indebted to Trump leads me to believe that he's probably working with them pretty aggressively.
Maybe. I really don't know. I'm just not enough. I'm not informed enough about this. But I also, one thing that I really do like about Trump is he is also very mercenary and therefore pragmatic in his, I think, view with alliances, except for when he's being sort of flattered and aesthetically.
Which is a problem. The person who we need to convince of this plan is Jared Kushner. If Jared Kushner gets on board with it, we can get Trump on board with it.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Jared Kushner is sufficiently mercenary, but I feel like at least with Venezuela, Trump, if he's going to do something, it's because he thinks that there is a very distinct benefit to the United States.
Oh, by the way, another crazy thing that's happened recently. Have you seen the riots in Mexico recently?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And that they're calling for America intervention, like America military occupation of Mexico, called for by the younger generation. That's another episode.
Yeah.
Well, I've often pointed out, if we did occupy Mexico and integrated Mexico into the United States, we could make the border Mexico's southern border, which would be incredibly easy to defend. It's an incredibly small, harder to cross border, and it would be so much easier to make it the 51st state. It's culturally very similar to us anyway.
In some ways, it's very, very distinct. But yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
Anyway, love you to death, Simone.
I love you too, gorgeous.
Bye.
Wait, I'm on the wrong side. Oh, I learned something that I just find quite interesting that has nothing to do with stuff we normally cover in our podcasts. But are you familiar with helium-3?
No, tell me about it.
This, like, I think it was someone who follows our podcast who shared this with me, but like, basically there's gold in the Mar Hills. It's just the hills are the moon and the gold is helium-3. And it's basically current nuclear power plants use fission of uranium, as you know, but like obviously we prefer a future with nuclear fission. But right now it's not really that feasible. Apparently it both is really lossy in terms of energy and it also produces neutrons. But fusion using helium-3, it results in basically what's called aneutronic reactions, and it produces power without neutrons, minimal waste, and virtually no radiation. So kind of like perfect fusion. But where are we going to get the helium-3? Because it's really, really scarce on Earth. Like only around 15 kilograms annually are produced of helium-3 on Earth as a byproduct of nuclear weapons maintenance. So it's not exactly like abundant here, but the moon's surface may have as much as 1.1 million metric tons of helium-3.
Oh, that'd be so cool. A viable economic reason for a moon base.
There's gold in them Mar Hills, I'm telling you.
Can we
it's up
get
there.
A moon base?
That's
want
the
moon
thing.
Base Alpha. Moon
Well,
base
so
Malcolm,
Russia and the US have announced ambitious plans actually for lunar mining, like related to this, because it's such a big freaking deal. Like basically, I think 25 tons. Yeah, 25 tons of helium-3 taken from a lunar mine. That's one space shuttle cargo. So just one trip, right? Could power the United States for a year. Our whole country. And we're not exactly like the light on electricity country, right? Like we're kind of big energy hogs, right? So that's just how valuable it is. But yeah,
Elon going after it or something?
No, actually, he's said nothing about the moon so far as I've heard. And Russia and the US have announced ambitious plans for lunar mining, but they haven't materialized. China is actively pursuing lunar exploration.
Well, and it matters everything was AI to be able to get more power.
I know, that's the thing. So looks like China has stages for its lunar exploration planned, and they've completed early stages already. China's kind of, they might be eating our lunch on AI, but not through the means you would think, but it's because they're going for the moon better than
But
we
for
are.
helium, well, no, I mean, as soon as we start to get in, AI is developing so quickly, it will be able to develop things like missions like this on its own.
Oh, so you think that we'll still get to the moon
Oh yeah, sure.
as long as we have smart AI, and then we'll just okay. So you think the bottleneck isn't energy initially; it's more just
Yeah, just getting AI to where it's going to be, and we're like way ahead of China on that
and
stuff.
using it smartly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like we're sleeping on the space race now, and that Elon Musk is overly focused on Mars and needs to get on the moon
Well,
here.
all of his tech could be used for the moon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it is also he's setting up supply chains and models built around more sustainable forms of like space cargo, mining, and getting stuff. So like harvesting helium-3. I mean, so the feasibility of harvesting and processing it remains to be seen. Of course, this is kind of theoretical at this point because no one's tried. Because you have to heat the helium up, I think, to like negative 60 degrees Celsius. I can't remember the exact number, but like it's really, really cold on the moon. And you have to make it slightly less really, really cold to get it out. And I don't know how they're going to do that. I mean, AI could figure it out, to your point, right? So it doesn't really matter if China is hanging out on the moon. It doesn't matter if they have a freaking moon base if they can't get it off the moon. So fair point there. Like we have to actually get there and be able to take it out and take it back. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. And thanks to our amazing listeners who share weird stuff like this with us. It's really cool.
All right. Look at this. Look at this. What are you doing? This is my beef lo mein that my wife made. Look at this. Could you imagine if you had this every night? Oh my God, could you imagine? It's so tender. You guys have no idea.
Yeah, it's summer. Right here. Oh, wait, right here. That's stable. Very stable.
Stable.
And I want to get that high up, Mommy. If you get me up there again, I can get that straight up for you.
That's not a cookie.
I can get that straight up.
Titan, do you want a cookie?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna get that one straight up. No toasties.
I'll get it.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
Wow.
That's so
Good job, you guys.
It's bent that way while it's so cool.
It is your hand. And Titan tried to eat it.
You want a real cookie, my friend?
I want to see what the picture looks like. My picture.
I love you,
Can I
Toasty.
see what the picture